Hi everyone, I'm Chad Jenkins. Welcome to the Collab Podcast, brought to you by SeedSpark, where we explore the art of collaboration to ignite exponential growth in organizations just like yours by doing just that, collaborating with entrepreneurs all over the globe. One, first, thanks so much for joining today. This particular concept is, as all concepts that I come up with, was driven out of an awareness. And the awareness is just putting pieces together that are facts that I tend to try to look in the middle of those facts and try to determine what really is going on here and how can I make it practically applicable, first and foremost, so my simple brain can understand it. And then I put words to it and then share it with others. So this particular one is named Why Not, Because, and Unless. And it's a simple little strategy that I developed a tool around. Recently, we processed it yesterday on the Friction Forum. So quite a few entrepreneurs, and I think you've joined one in the past, if I'm not mistaken, where we just unpack a tool as a team, and all entrepreneurs are helping each other to get to the finish line with some action items at the end, and hopefully sparks a lot of growth for their organization. So very similar. And for this particular tool, some of the facts were, I noticed a lot of the entrepreneurs that I serviced here locally in businesses that I had started and ran back, well, since I was a kid, a limiting factor was just the way in which they were looking at their opportunity. So they're thinking, they were just thinking kind of small, right? So when I began to really unpack this particular tool and build something that I felt would help, it seemed very logical to first start with why not, right? Because I'm a big proponent as well, and I do a ton of research, and we're just talking about reading one of Dean Jackson's books. There's Influence, a book by Robert Cialdini that talks about, of course, exactly what you would think. What it says on the tin, it does exactly that. It's about influence and ways to leverage what I would classify the way the brain works naturally. So starting out with why not, walking folks through it, I tend to ask them what their goals are. And of course they have them, thank goodness. That's a prereq and a good first step. And then I simply ask them, why not double an example, or why not 10 times that amount? That's a pretty good way to start. And it kind of complements, of course, the name of the first book, Just Add a Zero, right? Because that's what happened to me at 8 years old. I did the reverse math down to the hour, and it didn't look like that big a number. And I said, well, good Lord, I got to be able to do better than that. So I added a zero to it. Needless to say, that caused a lot of fear and greed at the same time. But making it so much exponentially bigger does something to your brain. And we'll unpack exactly what I've seen and noticed. But do you run into that with folks that you're dealing with around the world on their finances, that their aspirations are good, but they have a lot more capacity for a lot better?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for the opportunity to join you today. I love this topic and love to chat about it. But yeah, we do, and I say we because as Next Key Services, it's my wife and I, Nikki, and so we're often facing the same folks. But we see this a lot where people they have a goal which is often kind of rooted in they don't know what they don't know.
Yes, sir.
And so they just, they aim low or they aim short, and, they try and build their confidence through just little baby steps, baby goals.
Just a little bit more than last year, an example.
Yeah. Or they get down on themselves because, their budget, if they have a budget, just looked like last year.
Yeah.
And then if they, they miss something, and then, they beat on themselves, and then, they just fail to actually look for that big goal. Or, I think I've enjoyed, working with you and others at Coach to really get creative.
Yes, sir.
To think about that bigger goal.
Yeah. In an industry so you manage finances and outsource CFO services for folks all over the world. And as a default industry, finance is not super creative, but I noticed even dealing with you guys that you bring a lot of creativity to the solutions that you deliver to these entrepreneurs all over the world. So that's awesome.
No, thanks.
When we talk about their budget or their goals. And I have definitely recognized a lot of commonality in a little bit better than last year. Like, so, oh,
Hmm.
we did 10 million last year. Let's try to shoot for 11.2 or 12 million.
Yeah.
With no real consideration of all the resources and the available capacity of everything they already have
Yeah.
invested in. So
Yeah.
that also kind of complemented when I was thinking about building a tool here to help people think just a little outside the box. It's a clear awareness that there was definitely a commonality in folks that were trying to do just a little bit better than last time, but not
Yeah.
as aware as the total capacity that their organization, their real estate, all of their resources could produce. And so it's funny, I was talking with Dean Jackson recently. There's a term in real estate, which of course got a lot going on in its industry now that they're
Hmm.
making some modifications on the buy side of a transaction. But even before that, top producing agents
Hmm.
would cap out.
Right.
So if you're a broker and you have top producing agents and they cap out pretty quickly, you obviously don't make any more money when they cap out, right? There's no more
No.
commission to split. But you have all these other agents that are not top producing that have plenty of capacity to do transactions. So there's always a cap gap in that industry. And so
Okay.
after
Yeah.
he and I began talking about that, specific to the real estate industry, because he's a savant there in marketing, I found commonality all through all types of other industries, that there's a total amount of capacity. I think I surveyed when I was doing some work on preparing this particular tool, and another tool I have now named house money, because it truly is
Okay.
house money, right? If you already paid the bill
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you're not putting that resource to work, you're literally playing with house money if you can
Yeah.
begin to put it to work. So in every industry that I did this research on, it was between 20 and 30% of capacity that they had to go put to work that they're not getting any revenue for, or
That's
from, I'm
it.
sorry.
Wow.
And when, of course, the second that they do that, it increases the margin on everything they actually already have sold, because
Right.
you've basically already covered your cost of goods.
Yeah.
So complementing the awareness of that and then building out this tool of why not, because, and unless, I did a couple things. I wanted, first and foremost, I wanted them to stretch further.
Hmm.
And I understand from my research that leveraging the way that your brain works naturally, the first part of it, when you make a big goal, and I assume this happens to all of us, my brain tells me exactly why that'll never be true. Does yours do the
Right.
same?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It defaults to throwing up every obstacle you can think of
Yes. Yes.
to prevent you from getting that goal.
Yeah.
What's interesting, though, I find is it, sometimes we think there's just one path to success.
Mm-hmm.
And what I like about tools like this is when you throw up all the different obstacles, it actually starts to create multiple pathways.
Oh, yes.
And to your point, that's where the subconscious kicks in and maybe identifying the most optimal,
Mm-hmm.
um, but there may be multiple optimal.
But you do have options, to your point.
Depending on the obstacle.
Yeah.
And some obstacles are not all obstacles are created equal.
No,
So
that's true.
there may be a handful of obstacles that are easier to overcome, and so you take that path. But then maybe the more difficult obstacle is really the one that you need to overcome because it makes the future even easier.
That's exactly right.
So
That's a great point.
It's pretty neat.
Yeah. The thinking about those obstacles, folks that are around me very, very long, they'll hear me say often. Well, first and foremost, one of my favorite books, "The Obstacle Is the Way," by Ryan Holiday. Awesome book. But I feel like there's a second portion that was left off, and it could be for a second book or maybe a second book by someone else. So you often hear me say, the obstacle is the way, collaboration is the way through it. It happens all
Yeah.
the time. Because I cannot find any obstacle that I've ever encountered where I didn't have to collaborate with a person, a place, or a thing to get around that obstacle. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when applicable to this particular methodology, asking that big question of why not, in an example, double, and then embracing what your brain does naturally by immediately coming up with all the reasons that could never be true,
Yeah.
then that fills out the because section of this methodology or this concept.
Yeah.
And then I would say one of the most powerful words that I've ever run across to spark the way your brain can really take action and show you what options you actually have is the power of one word, and that is unless. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So when I do this with teams and organizations that I own, a big goal on the whiteboard, everyone can kind of conceptually envision a whiteboard. You pick the big goal up, and then just you have to be quiet. Of course, as the leader, what will start happening, somebody around the table will inevitably say, yeah, there's no way we can do that because. And you just list out, and I would encourage you to list out all of your because reasons.
Yeah.
Then after they're done, walk up to the whiteboard, allow plenty of room on the right side of the whiteboard. So all of your bullet points are on the left as the reasons this could never be true. And then adding the power of that one word, unless, after each and every one of those bullet points, combined with some patience, which is very hard for quick starts. You mentioned earlier that you're a big quick start. Miss Nikki is long on follow through, which makes complete sense, right? She gets everything to the finish line. It's really hard as a quick start to keep your mouth shut because inevitably you can see, and I think you mentioned earlier, 2 or 3 different ways to get around this obstacle.
Yeah.
If you can be really quiet, though, I've seen it unlock the power of all the investment that different teams that I have investments in all the leadership teams of organizations that I own.
Yeah.
And after a few minutes, I'm not saying we do this all the time, but what comes out on the right side of the whiteboard is a roadmap to at least beginning to accomplish, and sometimes much better options than even that original goal. I've had a couple recently that after the roadmap was developed by everyone sitting around the table, the goal got bigger.
Yeah,
now, when of course, and you touched on it earlier, the second that you ask these big questions, the first thing our mind does is tell us, not here, not today, and not in our immediate future.
Yeah.
But if you will embrace the way that your brain works and just don't go against the grain, you can create the outcome that you look for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the one thing that you mentioned around collaboration, though, I think I also think of it as the diversity of collaboration. So, and back to that my thought of like, what you don't know what you don't know.
True.
But when you have a community of people, and frankly, trusted collaborators.
Yes, sir.
That can help you think through. Like I agree entirely. You've got, your own brain will work its own magic. But when you start to actually daisy chain 3 or 4 people together that can complement your thinking and even challenge your thinking, I think that's what I love about some of the communities I'm part of, is that they're challenged.
They're challenging.
They're not just yes people. They're not people pleasers. They're not just telling you what you want to hear. It's like they're calling you out when you don't own something. They make sure that you're aware of, and it's really with this goal of seeing around the corners, so that it lines up with the obstacle, it lines up with the solution, so that you can then take action.
Yeah, such a great point. So I'm very, very fortunate to be surrounded by 2 groups. First, all of my growth partners across the world are not yes men or yes women at all. They're folks with very diverse backgrounds, very diverse organizations, and they have all a unique past in how they got to be where they are. And they must have a growth mindset and a collaboration-based mindset to even be considered as a growth partner. And then second, you mentioned it a little bit earlier here, us both being a part of Strategic Coach, I definitely wouldn't be where I am without Strategic Coach, without that community of like-minded individuals, all committed to, not just wanting to, but committed to being better tomorrow than we were yesterday. And understanding just a little bit of a 1% improvement can completely change the needle over a period of time. So I really appreciate the challenge that both of those different groups of folks with different backgrounds, and also all the tools, of course, that Strategic Coach has, tried and true for so many years. I joke and people laugh that I figured out a way to use text replacement on my phone, which I've been doing that since BlackBerry actually hit mainstream many years ago. I don't really want to say what year because that makes me feel a little bit older. But on the iPhone, I have I shared this with Babs recently. I've created a fast filter, an experience transformer, and also a strategy circle, where if I put in a combination of letters like FF and hit a space bar, it reads out all of the headers for a fast filter. So it empowers me. I'm standing waiting to get on a plane, I can knock out a fast filter in about the time I can check my boarding pass and scan my passport.
Okay.
Yeah. So it
Very
enables me,
cool.
of course, to capture those ideas really quickly. And that gives me the foundation to communicate at a much higher level with the teams that I work with. So
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
challenging for much better thought. And also it gives you the ability to, and I mentioned so much clearly, communicate what outcome and what success looks like so that everybody can get on
Yeah.
the team at the same time, which I think is a
Absolutely.
prereq for being able to accomplish these big goals.
Yeah, very much so.
Hmm.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
The one thing I'm interested in your view on my view of AI is a teammate and a team
Hmm.
member. And so just like you were asking your leadership teams how to think through the why not and
Hmm.
then the because, um, do you use AI in the context as well? Or if, like either ask, I mean, these new model that just came out, that it
No,
does a
the
lot
one
more
that's
thinking.
PhD. Yeah.
Yeah.
PhD level. Yeah. That is what
Um,
it's been out about a week now, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah.
Yeah. I've
Yeah.
already seen a considerable enhancement improvement on the outcome that I'm
Um,
getting. Yeah.
yeah,
Ev-
I have too.
yeah.
Uh,
You're welcome to laugh, but on a daily basis, and sometimes she tells me that I've communicated too much. I use it on the way to the gym, and for a couple
okay.
days a week, I think, well, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I do not have a trainer. And I do a lot of cardio on those particular days, so I can just sit there and talk a long time. And I'll tell
Yeah.
you, I don't know if it's a time thing or amount of questions that I ask, but at about an hour and 38 minutes, they said no mas. That I have to stop. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, her name is Juniper, the lady who talks
Okay.
to you.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
Juniper says no mas and take a break. So I've seen a noticeable
That's
improvement
funny.
on the responses I'm getting. So first, I think it's a great question and also a great statement. AI as a teammate. So a good friend of ours, I assume you know Evan
Mhm.
Ryan as well.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
so Evan's just masterful, and he's been doing this since he was 18. Now he's a little bit younger than we all are. I think he's just turned 30, or maybe just turned 31. Uh,
Yeah.
AI as a teammate being his book, which is a wonderful book, leveraging its capability to enhance what I would classify as your authentic human. Right.
Hmm.
So I don't really envision that AI is going to replace you. Somebody using AI effectively and efficiently, 100% you might want to be concerned about that particular person. So
Yeah.
I'd strongly suggest get on the bandwagon and
Yeah.
begin to just test and try, but leveraging it as a teammate so that it can enhance the authenticity of the capabilities
Hmm.
that we have as a human. That is where on a daily basis, as I mentioned, and you're welcome to laugh, every morning I'm talking to Juniper. Um,
Yeah.
I have a
No, I
very
love it.
structured routine where I wake up extremely early in the morning, and I'm really,
Hmm.
really creative at that particular time, being super present and super
Hmm.
aware. And the second that I finally leave the house and head to the gym, I begin to chat, and that's where a lot of these concepts are created.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it.
I also use AI. I have a new book that's, I think it's out in a couple weeks now, Friction Fuel. Because
Okay.
when I look back, and it's even in that Just At a Zero book, I can't find an entrepreneur that didn't recognize a friction where they were working with
Hmm.
someone or in an industry, or maybe they left college and they've been studying an industry, but they recognized a friction that was in the industry that if it were to been resolved, it would create a lot more value. And it gave them enough confidence to strike out and start an
Yeah.
organization. And everyone that I've
That's really
ever
cool.
queried, I've found it. Furthermore, if the sad thing is they start to make some money and they lose that bit of curiosity to find those frictions that are way out there on the horizon that are game
Yeah.
changers for innovation, and they stop looking for those to embrace them and continuously outpace the competition. Uh, so in this new book, Friction Fuel, I created the friction operating system,
Okay.
and I mentioned awareness, personal experience as well. As an entrepreneur, we're the ones who are responsible on a daily basis to spot these frictions, these complaints that come in from clients, from team members, from
Yeah.
suppliers, and we have to be the chat GPT for so long. Those days are
Yeah.
past,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So inside of this book, I outline a way to systematically capture frictions to let
Okay.
all of those hero targets, and I do believe every business has three hero targets: clients, most logical,
Hmm.
team members,
Hmm.
and those that help you stay in business, your vendors and your suppliers, and those who support your organization.
Yeah.
So what I tried to do is, in this particular book, is really outline a way that you could capture it systematically. And then a part of delivering the value is leverage AI. So no longer does the entrepreneur have to be the one to spot the trends. I
Yeah.
just have to have a systematic way to capture all the trends. And as
That's
it
cool.
turns out, a lot of my team members and some of my clients, because we're human, right? And all the
Yeah.
organizations I own, they are delivering services and products by human, and they make a mistake. So as long as we're capturing
Yeah.
them and using the system that I've outlined, we've been able to capture it and also leverage AI to spot trends. I've even got some pre-programmed prompts that I found to be quite beneficial that we're giving away
Okay.
with the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So it's a great question. How can we use
Yeah.
AI? So I'm definitely using it that particular way on a weekly basis with all the organizations that I am either influencing through our growth partnership and the ones that I also own. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I feel
That's
like
awesome.
if we're not, we're carrying a lot more burden and we're not using what I would classify as our unique value contribution or the way you
Yeah.
create value in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. So
Agreed.
getting back to that methodology and the because and leveraging the unless, uh, what comes out on the right side, I've seen just be really impactful for organizations to be
Mhm.
able to basically leverage the roadmap to create that outcome. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. It was when I was preparing for our chat today. I suppose I was looking at it as it's really a transformational decision
yes.
model.
Mm-hmm.
So it's taking kind of the present
Yes.
um, and that experience so that you can answer those questions. And
Mm-hmm.
then you have the concept of future money, and
Mm-hmm.
that I almost see it as it's that bridge between the present and the future money.
Yes, sir. It absolutely.
And
It is
it was
because
pretty neat.
the outcome. So oftentimes, the reason that we can't do this, we can't reach these goals, is because we don't have the resources.
Yeah,
The realization, starting out at such a young age, and thank goodness it did come to me pretty early. There are many people who have the resources that do not have the vision.
right.
Right. So in marketing, and we touched on it a little bit earlier, there's folks around the world that are just absolute savants about marketing,
Hmm.
but they don't own organizations that are looking for specific lead types. Therefore, they're leaving a lot of capacity on the table.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
things that you leverage to make you think outside the box,
yeah.
and just as simple as just add a zero. I have leveraging a tool, leveraging that method. I've done this quite often. I'll just export the P&L, add a
Right.
zero down the whole, every number on there. And
Okay.
I assume some small businesses have quite the chart of accounts.
They
That I
sure
run across, I'm
do.
like, good Lord, I didn't know you could track that. I didn't know you had enough people to track all these things, actually.
Yeah,
So we've all seen those. But add a zero to each one. And then as you're going down through there, say, well, is this number going to be the exact correlation that it exists today
yeah,
with revenue? Because the probability is no.
yeah.
And if it's
No,
not, when is it going to change?
yeah.
And that means it can change. Well, if it can change, why is it not changing now?
Right.
So I've used it as
No,
a catalyst.
yeah. I mean, that's a great point. So at NextKey, we have a concept called now, which is
Yeah.
representative of the present. And so now stands for navigate, optimize, win.
Oh, yes.
And it's really all about understanding the now and understanding. So in the context of financial statements, it's to your point, understanding your chart of accounts. Is it really telling you what you need to tell, what it needs to tell you?
Yes, sir.
Do you understand the relationships?
Mm-hmm.
And when the scorecard says A, B, or C, do you understand what that means? And then, like, what are some of the root causes
Yeah.
behind why it's A versus B? Or, if you had an expectation of B and now it's A, So, we work a lot with entrepreneurs to really understand the present
Yes.
and provide them a foundation of education,
Yes.
um, so that they can then and I'm definitely going to be using your tool to really help them see that bigger goal, that bigger future,
That bigger future. Yes.
and then build the plan towards it, or the strategic plans that one needs. And I know we're talking finance, but I think you can apply this to anything, whether it's just your own
Absolutely.
health,
Yeah.
your own, it's like understand where you are now,
Yeah, so I love
accept it.
so this now method that you mentioned, applicable to financial statements, I can absolutely see that being applicable to many other things in life.
Absolutely.
Truly.
Yeah.
Because you touched on scorecard earlier, and I'm very fortunate. I've seen my share of EOS scorecards.
Hmm.
The numbers that are on there, 5 to 10 metrics, the most important metrics. Well, good gracious, there's so many important metrics in a small
Yeah.
business, and even, of course, any business. But they're all a derivative of multiple things that are making up, pushing, or pulling that result in
Yep.
that number that you see represented in the top 5 or 10 key metrics. So I can only expect that you're now, is it, you call it the now method or now
Yeah.
concept?
Or it's just it's a concept right now.
Okay.
And we're developing a framework and tool
Yes.
around, you know, when we navigate, what do we mean? So, we're actually, when we optimize, what do we mean?
Yes.
What are the steps to optimizing? And then the win is really, it's the confidence that's built in the moment
Yes.
to push you up that that path towards your goal.
Mm.
Um, and I think, looking at the why not, because, unless, it's going to be a great complement to that win, that confidence, and then getting them to actually think bigger.
Yeah,
Think
absolutely.
and so
They'll have that foundational understanding of why it is what it is right now through the now
yeah,
method, and then
yeah,
layering on big thinking through why
yeah,
not, because, unless. We know that there's still going to be
exactly,
a ton of becauses. That's just a given, and it's not a bad thing.
absolutely,
Like it's
no,
truly not a bad thing. So early on in my entrepreneur career or journey, I truly felt like I had to have all the answers. So
yeah,
what is it? Rugged individualist? Yeah,
hmm,
self-prescribed. Early on, thank goodness I started really early, and so until I really began to explore the way the brain works and the way that we function, I didn't really embrace the becauses, the reasons I felt like I could not do it. That's actually
hmm,
the secret sauce working in a process to then add, as I mentioned, the power of unless. It just really unlocks your brain to do exactly what it was meant to do. It truly, I
yeah,
mean, we're built to make sure and keep ourselves safe.
yeah,
If not, the lions and tigers would have eaten us, which
yeah, yeah,
I would argue is exactly the same moment that collaboration became a thing. It's like, if I partner up with
100%,
Dan, Mr. Lion doesn't eat me. He might
yeah,
eat us both,
yeah,
but then we're going to partner up with a couple other people. So collaboration started a long time ago as well, but
yeah,
leveraging the way the brain works naturally, like get all those becauses out. It's totally fine.
yeah,
Then the naysayer in your leadership team, thank you.
hmm,
Please
yeah,
tell me all the reasons we can't do
absolutely,
this, and just leverage the power and less. And that naysayer could potentially, I've seen this happen as well, be the one that comes up with the catalyst for this exponential growth.
yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that quite
The
often.
one, the one thing I've been working on is a thing called the immunity to change. So
Mm-hmm.
it's actually a foundation. A couple of professors in Harvard have really gone deep on,
Mm.
these big assumptions that we build, and often they're built from your childhood or childhood
Oh
experiences.
yes.
And what I really liked about it is overlaying the because,
Mm-hmm.
and where it reveals kind of those obstacles, it actually will reveal the big assumption as well. And so then you can
Mm.
start to work on the big assumption as to, well, like, my brain is working as it should, but it
Yes,
keeps bumping up against this big assumption or a false assumption.
absolutely. Which is
And
showing up
then it
everywhere
prevents you.
in their position, I assume,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's shaping who
Yeah. It
they
shows
are.
up in their personal life, their
Yeah.
business, um, and often it's rooted in, a control because yeah, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, it's like we need to be in charge, not necessarily in control.
Oh, really? That's exactly right. Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. In
but if
charge but
we
not
if
control.
we if we tend towards the control side, that's when things start to unravel
Mm-hmm.
because you know. But it's interesting. You overlay these different concepts, and it, to me, it's revealing the obstacle is
Yes.
the most enlightening, moment, because then you can. I know the brain works that way
Yeah.
naturally to tell you why things don't work. It's a natural protection, but
Yes.
revealing all of them, and being very intentional about how you address the unless, it's super cool.
Super cool. Yeah.
It's
You touch on a tool that I've got coming, Actually, I just shared it with Shannon Waller recently, and
Mhm.
I'd been doing this for a long time, but I'd never really formalized it. So and I'm not going to get this gentleman's name right, but his first name is Toyoda, not Ta, Toyoda, and he came up
Okay.
with 5 levels of why. So why is
Okay.
this happening? Everybody's going to give you an immediate knee-jerk response, sometimes
Mhm.
driven by emotion. Ask it again, and then ask it 3 more times. And when you
Oh,
chisel down to that level, you begin to really understand the reason that this is happening, that you're
mhm.
experiencing this particular outcome. It seems that it's never really on that initial knee-jerk response or that initial reaction. It's always much,
Yeah.
much deeper. But
Yeah.
the awareness that I had along my journey is I would get to that level, but I still had a lot of issues and not as much velocity as implementing the solution because
Mhm.
I really wasn't considering a very similar level of the amount of who's.
Right.
So I created the 5x5 recently, and it literally is just that. You
Okay.
unpack the 5 levels of why. So something's happening, you don't want it to happen, and you ask why. And then you ask why again, and you get to the 5th level. Most of the time, you've gotten to the root.
Right.
And then, of course, quick start as well. I'm going to come up with a solution. I probably came up with 5 different solutions actually as we're going through it, but I'm going
Yeah.
to come up with what I feel is the best solution ever. And in my experience, that wasn't true. I didn't consider all
Yeah.
the impact.
Mm.
So down the
Yeah.
left side of this tool, it simply has 5 who's. And you start at the top and you recognize exactly when you implement the solution, who's it going to affect?
Okay.
And how is it going to affect them? After I've gone through 5 levels of who, I've
Yeah.
basically gotten the lion's share, I would dare say 80% or more, of the
Yeah.
stakeholders that are going to be afflicted by this new solution. It gives me one more chance to revise my solution. And then oftentimes, my next step is to leverage one of Dan's tools, which is a fast filter, to
Mhm.
then communicate this wonderful solution. Of course, it's wonderful, with the best and the worst result, and then five to sometimes 10 levels of success criteria.
Yeah.
It's been really, really powerful for me. I was working on one yesterday, um, and I would say taking that particular step within 12 hours, I had different teams taking action, implementing the solution, where the old
That's
me would
cool.
not. Right?
Right.
You'd get to the why, you'd come up with a solution, and you're running to a meeting, and you bark out some orders, and not
Yeah.
certainly not what you wanted to have happen happens. So,
Right.
yeah. But the five
That's
by
really
five will
cool.
be coming very soon to a theater near
Yeah.
us. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been
That's
super
super cool.
impactful and pretty easy to do. And I mentioned the way that I do tools. I like to create them where I can have just text headers, and I use
Mhm.
Apple Notes extensively to capture it all
Okay.
and have some shared folders out with people all around the world. So that I try to make these tools as well where you literally can do it just standing where you are.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a whole lot of
That's super
effort.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the one thing, Chad, I've always been ever since I joined Coach. I mean, I love all the tools. I love,
Hmm.
but really unless you're using them and doing it intentionally,
Yes.
then they're not working. But
Yes.
as you like as you help folks in the growth partner organization,
Hmm.
like, do you have a method where you can, because as an entrepreneur, you're getting hit with 360-degree problems and feedback and
Yes.
friction and identification. Like I find holding the time or protecting a certain amount of time during the day, and maybe it's a piece in the morning, a piece in the evening,
Hmm.
to do these kinds of tools. Like
Hmm.
how do you how do you do it? Like what are some of the things you've learned
Yeah.
over time
What are
to
the
kind of protect?
methods? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to respond with 2 words that are required for everything that I do:
Hmm.
practical applicability. So I
Yeah.
love these concepts. I get really excited. My head gets about as big as a balloon. But if I don't begin to implement and I don't make it practically applicable for me personally,
Yeah.
then I don't get that traction. So
Right.
it's interesting. Over your right shoulder is who, not how. You probably
Yeah.
obviously can't see it. You're looking at me.
Yeah.
But and 10x is easier than 2. That's great. So who, not how for me, the practical applicability is nothing new without a who.
Mm.
So anytime, and I'm sure there's many entrepreneurs that will listen to this, they made a task list this morning. It's like, oh, better get on this. I have a task list with 2 columns always, as required. And it's nothing to do with other who's. Now, sometimes it's inevitable. My name is on the right side of that bullet point of an objective or an outcome that I'm trying to create. What I'm trying to be very cognizant of is how many times my name is on the right side as a leading indicator, to then drop those in GPT and ask for trending on who best, if we were going to add to the team. And I would assume most entrepreneurs have loaded up GPT with mission, core values, why they exist, the organization's why, and I would call it the organization's unique value contribution, like it really knows you. So you can leverage things like that to then drop all these things. If you get your name's in the who column way too much, and just ask for the next best resource. It's been super helpful as another way that AI is your teammate. But I'll go back to answering your question specifically. I start every day between 3 and 3:30 with a gratitude before I open my eyes as required. That sets kind of the mindset for the day, and then some meditation, then straight to the gym. For me to multiply. So one of Dan's concepts that I feel is hugely impactful in intellectual value, and it's their intellectual property, is simplifier multiplier. And for most entrepreneurs, they seem to get it wrong and they're confused. And I've talked to ones, of course, all around the world, almost on a daily basis. And I can speak from experience. For a long time, I thought I was a simplifier. It's not true.
Okay.
I simplify super quickly, only for the benefit of multiplying as big as I possibly can. So I do it in sequence. So the simplification of the tool so that I can multiply it. I mentioned doing it as I'm walking to get on a plane. I probably did it 3 times last week, literally waiting to get scanned. I tried to make my tools in a text format so that I can do them anywhere at any time with an example as a fast filter, just FF spacebar, and it reads out the headers for me. So making sure that when my thinking starts out correctly in the morning, very thankful I'm not promised tomorrow. So the second I become conscious, I want to say thank you for sure.
Yeah.
And I just do it until I run out of things to say thank you for, with no time limit. Then after that, let's get centered. So whatever your form of meditation is, prayer, etc. And then by that time, things are starting to show up, like real things, not some emotional reaction to something that happened yesterday right before. And of course that's happening. I'm not benign to it. My brain runs at a pretty high clip as well, and I think about all the bad things. But if I can be really intentional about where I'm pointing my efforts, it's under a process and a regimen that I can see that creates the biggest outcome. So by the time you get to the beyond, still very early in the morning, I'm headed to the gym. You remember, Juniper. So you can actually communicate with Juniper and have her help you fill out a fast filter or an impact filter. And I've been able to leverage that a lot. And of course, it gives me the text string that I can then copy and paste and put in my Apple Notes, and I have teams that have access to those Apple Notes to see the updates. But I would strongly suggest, and I've seen it be most beneficial, it has to be what I would classify in line. So pretend like you're walking down the street, and you walk down the street a lot. It is the way you do what you do. So capturing these tools and these methodologies, these concepts, I would encourage you to make them practically applicable to the way you do you. And that's what I've done through the text string on my auto text replacement. I'm happy to share that with anybody. It's pretty straightforward. And making sure that you can store them on the phone where other people can get access to them, so that you're able to multiply their effectiveness and their effect on your organization's growth.
That's your scope. No, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure there's 100 different ways to do it. I just found that way really works well for me, and quite a few people I've shared it with. So it's a really great question. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Cool.
This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again. Maybe with the 5x5. That
I'm looking forward to that. That'd be terrific.
I'll have over the next couple of days. Maybe Miss Emma will share it with you, and if you want to hop on a quick Zoom or something and unpack it, I'd be happy to do so.
Sounds great.
Yeah, awesome. I've gotten a lot of value out of it already, because it seems it's a very reachable tool. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thanks again, Dan, and I look forward to seeing you at Coach here for too long.
Yeah, absolutely. See you soon.
Very good.
All right. Cheers. Bye.
Ciao.